When a father is shot to death in front of his son, the community of Vienna, Virginia is panic-stricken that a mysterious killer may be roaming their quiet suburban streets.
John's death was a tragedy.
Even if you live in the most wonderful community, darkness can find you.
As police struggle to catch the killer, a real-life whodunit unfolds.
From the beginning, this was an absolute mystery.
But when police discover a strange clue,
Nobody really knows what it is.
a diabolical scheme unlike any they have ever seen starts to unravel, revealing the most unlikely of suspects.
These kinds of tragedies occur even in places that people think are safe havens.
A few miles west of the nation's capital lies Vienna, Virginia, a picturesque hideaway known for its attractive neighborhoods, family sensibilities, and small-town personality.
Many of the citizens of Vienna work in Washington, D.C. But essentially, it's a middle-class community, has a wonderful little commercial area, a lot of nice restaurants.
It's a tight-knit kind of community. People tend to know each other, and it's a place that a lot of people want to live and raise their families.
Despite its proximity to the big city problems found in Washington, D.C., Vienna somehow remains relatively safe and crime-free.
It's a place with occasional speed traps, but otherwise there's really no crime to speak of.
It's there that 38-year-old John Kowalczyk, born to Polish immigrants and with an appetite for success, is following the American dream.
John Kowalczyk is somebody who used to work for the government, and then he strikes out on his own and he becomes a successful developer.
His work may be his passion, but his heart is with his kids. Recently divorced after a 13-year marriage to Greta Lowell, John has two sons, 12-year-old Ryan and 9-year-old Troy.
He came from a closely knit family. He was persistent about his responsibilities to his two sons.
John was a good father. He loved his kids, loved watching his older son play soccer, and by all accounts, he was a doting dad.
Even John's love life is rejuvenated. He's found his soulmate in Michelle Lichter and plans to marry her in a few months.
They had both come from unhappy marriages, and they had found each other and gave each other a fair amount of comfort and consolation.
With a new successful career and a marriage just around the corner, things seem to be back on track for John.
He was in the prime of his life. He was happy.
On June 10th, 1993, John is spending part of the day with his older son, Ryan. After enjoying the afternoon together at Ryan's soccer practice, the two grab some food to go and wait for Greta in a prearranged parking lot in Vienna.
As they're sitting and eating, they finish. Ryan gets up, gets out of the truck. He's going to throw his trash away, and he's gone for just a moment. But while he is gone, there's a pop.
Thinking the loud sound is a firecracker, Ryan calmly walks back to his father's truck.
Dad!
When he suddenly realizes there's something horribly wrong.
Ryan could see his father slumped over, and then eventually saw the blood and realized that something terrible had happened to his father.
The 12-year-old boy frantically runs to the street trying to flag down help.
In the course of trying to find somebody who can call the police, Ryan's mom, Greta, gets there.
Dad!
When Greta sees John in the truck, it's obvious he's dead.
They went into the street to try to find people in cars who would have a mobile phone that could be used to call police or to call for help.
As it happens, driving by is a Vienna police officer who, upon pulling into the lot, assesses the situation.
Yeah, I got a male, 40s, gunshot wound.
He takes command of this crime scene. He calls in the headquarters to get an investigator out there.
Detectives arrive as daylight fades and determine this is a very different kind of murder.
They see John in the truck, slumped over. He's been shot. The bullet went in through the back of his head, behind his ear. This was a massive wound, and there was a lot of bleeding.
It's clear to police that this is not an accidental or random killing.
It looks like a planned killing, really from almost the beginning.
As police look for evidence, it appears the killer vanished without a trace. But then, they discover a small object near the back of the truck that stands out.
There's this plastic casing. Nobody really knows what it is, but investigators think that it may have something to do with the crime, so they tag it and take it with them.
There's something else they gather from the crime scene. Based on the positioning of the truck and the nearby building, detectives have a good idea where the killer stood.
There was, off to the side of where the truck was parked, a doorway in which a shooter could have very easily hidden, been out of sight, and made a clear shot right through that open back window.
I always get him from this spot.
Detectives talk to Greta and then question Ryan, who is visibly upset.
Hey, little man, can you be strong for me and answer a couple of questions?
He tells them he heard a loud noise, but didn't see anything.
This was incredibly distressing. This was supposed to be just a regular child custody handoff, and instead, John's killed.
As police continue searching for clues, John's fiancée, Michelle, arrives.
What happened?
Confused and worried.
Ma'am, do you know this person?
It's John's truck!
She and John were supposed to meet that evening after John had handed off his son so that they could go to a dance place in Maryland.
Ma'am, I wouldn't go over there if I was...
Michelle seems completely caught off guard when detectives break the news that John has been killed.
How did this happen?
She's hysterical, she's frantic and screaming, and it's just a really tragic situation to behold.
This is her boyfriend who she intends to marry. She is totally shattered by the whole thing.
As John's body is taken away, a crowd gathers. Investigators ask around to see if anyone saw or heard anything. They come up empty-handed.
There were literally no witnesses.
The only thing was that people did hear the pop. That gunshot was heard far and wide.
This was an absolute mystery.
Fairfax County Commonwealth Attorney Robert Horan will be responsible for prosecuting the case. Even with 30 years of experience, Horan is shocked by the chilling details of the crime.
Who is bad enough to want to kill a man in a public place when he's there with his young son?
Detectives bring the family members down to the police station and start by getting a formal statement from Ryan.
I know you've had a very difficult night.
And then move on to his mom, Greta. It's obvious from the start that she has no qualms about expressing no love lost for her ex.
She indicated from the beginning that she was not happy with him.
We got divorced.
She was bitter over the divorce battle, and she was bitter over the custody battle.
But he's moved on quite fast.
Greta felt doubly violated, not only by the failure of the marriage, but by the fact that he was happy and moving on.
I don't really know.
But it's more than just the divorce and custody that Greta is unhappy with.
I know I'm not getting the money. I know my kids are not getting the money.
She had complaints that he was shortchanging her on money.
Despite their differences, Greta insists that she had nothing to do with the murder and was at her parents' house just before driving to meet John. However, Greta is a suspect given her and John's combative relationship.
Wish we could see each other more often, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
They were constantly at loggerheads. They fought all the time. They were not happy together. That's why they got the divorce.
So the police wonder, would Greta have conspired with someone to have her husband killed at a place where she knew he would be.
So your mom should be here pretty soon.
At a time where she knew he would be.
The question for police is just how badly does Greta hate John? "38-year-old developer John Kowalczyk is shot to death on June 10, 1993, in his truck in the heart of Vienna, Virginia, while his 12-year-old son Ryan is only feet away. The murder, carried out in public view, is unlike anything residents of this sleepy suburban community have ever seen before.
It was a shocking event because of the venue and the circumstances. There didn't appear to be a ready motive, or if there was a motive, the suspects hadn't been identified.
At the Vienna police station, investigators are concerned that John's ex-wife, Greta Lowell, has a possible motive after a messy divorce.
Because of the difficult, tempestuous divorce and custody proceedings, Greta was indeed a suspect.
Despite their suspicions, Greta fully cooperates and agrees to take a lie detector test the following day.
Anything you need. I just need to get my son home now.
Before she leaves, the police ask Greta one last question. Could anyone else have wanted John dead?
Yes, there is someone.
Greta alerted to the police the troubles between John and Michelle's ex-husband, Jacob.
Jacob Lichter.
According to Greta, John's fiancée, Michelle Lichter,
I can't do this anymore.
Why?
was married to a hothead who had it out for John.
Michelle's ex-husband, Jacob, and John didn't like each other at all, in part because Jacob blamed John for the breakup of his marriage to Michelle.
When police question Michelle, she admits that her ex-husband Jacob was furious over her divorce.
Jacob's a Paul of rage. Can't stand John.
Jacob took all of his anger and turned it toward John. He just hated the man. He loathed the man.
Police ask Michelle if Jacob ever acted violently toward John.
I mean, there were times that Jacob did become aggressive.
Most notably, at an incident at an event that both men attended a year before John's death.
John was at a graduation ceremony for one of Michelle's children.
You need to leave. You're here disrespecting everything.
At the graduation, there was an altercation between Jacob and John.
You're supporting my wife? You're supporting my children?
A shoving match got out of hand.
Show her what a punk you are.
It's not the place to do it.
Get out of here and you sit down, tough guy. I'm right here.
Jacob was the aggressor in the fight, and Jacob got convicted of assault, and the judge put him on a restraining order.
Alarmed by this revelation, police want to know if Jacob's anger could push him to murder.
I don't think he would do that. I don't think it would go that far.
In fact, Michelle has her own theory about who would want to hurt John. It's not her ex-husband they should be looking at, but someone on Greta's side of the family.
Greta's brother, Brad.
Michelle urged the police to look at Brad, Greta's brother, as a suspect.
She said that Brad wound up in a lawsuit fighting over a real estate commission. Then Brad lost the lawsuit, and John got the real estate commission, and Brad was very unhappy with that.
Police have no reason to suspect Michelle. As she leaves, detectives realize they've got a lot of legwork ahead of them. And it would be a shot in the arm if a crime lab finds something definitive.
As police are figuring out potential suspects, possible motives, they've got to look at the bullet and the body, the blood, and this plastic casing.
2 days later, on June 12th, the full autopsy and ballistic reports are completed. And they're a double-edged sword, revealing clues about the killer that are both illuminating and vexing at the same time.
The bullet in the brain of John Kowalczyk was a .30 caliber bullet.
They knew the type of gun that would fire that kind of bullet. And the big type was the Thompson Center Contender, a type favored by hunters.
But what is more disturbing to police is the plastic casing found at the scene.
That plastic thing that they weren't really sure what it was, it turned out to be a sabot.
The sabot, also pronounced sabot, is essentially a cover for the bullet, so that nobody can match it to the gun.
If you put that over the bullet before it's fired from a weapon, as that bullet goes down the barrel of the weapon, the lands and grooves in the barrel aren't impressed on the bullet.
It's a dramatic discovery that tells police this is a carefully planned and premeditated killing.
The prosecutor of the case had been on the job for over 25 years and had only had one murder-for-hire case.
This lack of experience, coupled with multiple suspects and very little evidence, has investigators bracing for an extremely challenging case. At the same time, friends and family harden themselves for the difficult task of saying their final farewells to John. On June 15, 1993, 5 days after his death, they gather in his hometown of Yonkers, New York, for his funeral. Though his ex-wife, Greta, does not attend, his fiancée, Michelle, is there, her world shattered by his death.
She loved the man and was overcome with grief that he was gone.
He was a loving person, was very kind to her children. She was looking forward to getting married to him.
The sudden loss is devastating for John's sons, especially Ryan, who witnessed his father's death.
The shooting occurred while John's son was nearby. This is a terrible tragedy for a 12-year-old.
Back in Vienna, police narrow their sights on the two people who seem to hate John.
Investigators boil it down and they say Brad or Jacob is who we're looking for.
But before they get a chance to speak to either of the men, one of them will go public with a shocking statement. It's June 1993, less than a week after John Kowalczyk was shot to death while sitting in his truck in downtown Vienna, Virginia. Across the community, anxiety is escalating while the killer continues to roam free. And the apparent randomness of the crime has everyone fearing he may strike again.
It was a big deal as far as Vienna itself was concerned, because Vienna doesn't have murder.
While investigators try to crack the case, authorities are doing their best to calm the public.
Right after the events, some officials from the city of Vienna said they believed that the shooting of John was a murder for hire and that the public at large should not be afraid.
Their words fall on deaf ears. And as the local rumor mill churns over who did it, one of the suspects makes a move that grabs headlines. Jacob Lichter, the ex-husband of John's fiancée, Michelle, goes public.
He releases a statement saying he has nothing to do with this murder, he knows nothing about this murder.
Jacob's deliberate efforts to calm suspicions surrounding his connection to the case
You're gonna want to see this.
only seems to raise more questions.
To go public, to call attention to themselves, that's pretty rare. Jacob just sent up a signal flare and made all the police go, whoa, let's look into this guy who's talking about he didn't do it, and he's talking about it more publicly than we are.
A week after the murder, police question Jacob at his attorney's office. He admits his history of conflicts with John over his relationship with Michelle, but insists he had nothing to do with his murder.
Jacob was open with the police, and he was concerned about John's relationship with Michelle.
How would you describe your
relationship with John.
He was very clear that he thought John was a bad guy overall, a bad guy for Michelle, and a bad guy for his children.
Besides John coming in and stealing my family?
He took position he had nothing to do with this, had no reason to be trying to kill somebody.
No.
That he was in his office in Alexandria at the time all of this was happening.
When asked if anyone can back up his alibi, Jacob doesn't give a very convincing answer.
There may have been a cleaning lady there who saw me, but I'm not sure.
His response to questions about owning a gun are equally alarming.
Jacob admits that he does own a gun, and officers recommend that Jacob freely surrender his guns. A uniformed officer will come and pick them up and have them submitted for testing.
Jacob agrees, and before police let him go, they ask him to take a polygraph test. Again, he cooperates, but with a caveat.
He's willing to take a private test, but his lawyer and he do not want him to take the police-administered test.
Despite his efforts to comply with the police, Jacob's done little to ease their suspicions. Investigators will need to check his alibi before they can strike him from their list. In the meantime, they turn their focus to the other prime suspect, John's ex-brother-in-law, Brad Lowell.
Brad had had a business relationship with John, and in that business relationship had lost $300,000.
Investigators wonder, is that enough for Brad to want John dead? So they ask him to come to the police station for questioning.
You mind telling us where you were the night of June 10th?
Brad told them that he was at his parents' house in McLean until about 5 p.m. Then he left there and did errands. Then he did a jog about 6 p.m. Then he went home, had dinner, and stayed home.
Brad's alibi, like Jacob's before him, is less than convincing.
He had no witnesses. He had no people who could verify that he had done these things.
The last thing police want to know is if he has any weapons.
I don't own a gun personally, no.
He told them that while he did not have a gun, he did have access to guns because his parents had an extensive gun collection.
Thank you.
Now, investigators are eager to speak with Brad's parents, Stanley and Camille Hyman, and arrange a time to meet with the couple. At their attorney's office, police start by asking the Hymans about their relationship with their ex-son-in-law.
I don't like John.
There was no love lost between this family and John. Stanley told investigators that he knew John had a secret stash of money.
Collection of cash that he has hidden.
He was just refusing to dip into it to provide for his wife and children.
When asked about Brad's alibi, the Hymans confirmed that their son was with them earlier in the evening the night of John's murder.
He was there till about 5, but Brad would never do anything to hurt John.
Okay, and then where were you after that?
When the police asked Stanley and Camille about where they were the night that John was shot, they had a very foolproof alibi. They were at a conference in Crystal City.
Camille and Stanley were conducting a career-building workshop for 80 people.
We had a conference in Crystal City that night.
And as for the guns that Brad told detectives he had access to, Stanley schedules a time for police to come to his house and examine them.
Yeah, that'd be fun.
With Stanley and his wife cooperating, police circle back to their daughter, John's ex-wife, Greta, who consents to take a lie detector test as promised.
She passes it when they ask her, "Did you conspire with anyone to murder your husband? Do you know who murdered your husband?"
Greta is now fully in the clear, leaving the detectives no closer to solving the murder. But 2 days later, the mystery thickens. As police are about to examine Stanley's gun collection, one of the suspects attempts suicide.
Is he really trying to kill himself because of what he's done?
If he was innocent, wouldn't he want to live?
On June 20th, 1993, 10 days after John Kowalczyk's mysterious murder, investigators received the shocking news that one of their main suspects has just tried to kill himself.
From the police perspective, a suicide attempt by a suspect is very suspicious.
Especially the one man who physically threatened John, Jacob Lichter, the jealous ex-husband of John's fiancée.
He downs 30 sleeping pills and he survives.
Struggling with depression, Jacob releases another statement to the press to justify his drastic behavior.
Jacob explained that he felt that his involvement in this case had disgraced his family, and that he felt pressure from the media and embarrassment.
But his suicide attempt does the exact opposite, setting off alarms for investigators.
But it certainly triggers another look at him. You always think of the question of why.
Desperate to clear his name once and for all, Jacob agrees to take a polygraph test as soon as he's released from the hospital. In the meantime, police visit the Hyman home in nearby McLean, Virginia, to look at John's father-in-law Stanley's gun collection. What they find is a sight to behold.
They go into the basement where there's an indoor firing range. Stanley opens up his gun safe and he has 30 guns.
There are a lot of antique weapons, but also there were some modern weapons, both handguns and rifles.
It's an exciting array of weapons for a gun enthusiast. To the officers looking through the collection, only one rifle gets their hearts racing. A Thompson Center Contender. The same type of gun police believe was used to kill John.
What do you use this one for, Stanley?
That's just part of my collection. It's never even left the range.
When the police recognized that Stanley had the gun that they were looking for that could fire the bullet that they found in the body of the murder victim, they went to get a warrant to seize that gun.
There's something even more startling that police find in Stanley's basement.
I also saw on the floorboards of the indoor shooting range, they saw sabots.
And those plastic sheathings were similar to the sheathing that was on the bullet that killed John.
What about these, Stanley?
Investigators question Stanley about the gun and the sabots found in their home.
They're not uncommon. They're used for hunting. It improves accuracy.
The coincidences are too great. Police aren't convinced that Stanley's just a gun enthusiast.
That the Hymans had a gun collection, that the gun collection included a Thompson Center Contender, and that it included these plastic sheathings, made the police extremely suspicious of the Hymans.
The officers collect the rifle and inform the Hymans that they will be in touch. But like many of John's friends and Vienna residents, they leave still guessing who could have committed the murder.
The press and the community was still very interested in the case. In fact, the police had to deal with a very long 5,000-word piece that reviewed many facts and added to some of the speculation about the case.
For Robert Surabel, John's friend and lawyer, the case hits close to home, and he can't help but take it personally.
John's murder affected me and my family in a dramatic way. It was an uncomfortable time for me. We all had our beliefs about who had caused John to be murdered.
Amid the speculation, 2 days after leaving the hospital, Jacob moves to clear his name by taking a polygraph exam.
Jacob passed the polygraph test in his statements that he was not involved in John's death, did not kill John, and did not hire anyone to kill John.
Jacob may think he's off the hook, but it's not enough to sway the police given his hostility toward John and his sketchy alibi.
Polygraph tends to be somewhat of a game because of the reality. It can never be used in a courtroom one way or the other.
4 weeks after John is killed, investigators in Vienna are still hard at work to unlock the mystery of this murder, when a phone call comes in from a West Virginia Sheriff's Department 100 miles away.
Vienna, Virginia police get a really interesting call. Comes in from West Virginia.
Are you sure?
On the other end of the line is Morgan County Chief Deputy John Ketterman, who's been searching for a missing person, Les Manning, in Berkeley Springs, West Virginia. He explains that while searching Les's bedroom, he discovered 2 bits of evidence he believes are possibly connected to John's murder.
I found a matchbook. It said Vienna Wolf Trap Motel.
The name Vienna rings a bell. As chance would have it, Ketterman has been following the high-profile murder case of John Kowalczyk. And the motel is just blocks away from where John was shot.
With this matchbook to the Wolf Trap Motel was a sheet of paper that had phone numbers on it.
One of which they trace back to a man by the name of Stanley Hyman.
I was wondering, is that the same
I said,
Stanley
is this
Hyman?
the same phone number as your Stanley Hyman? He says, it is.
What does John's ex-father-in-law have to do with Ketterman's missing persons case?
The police have 2 physical pieces of evidence that link Les Manning to a location in Northern Virginia near the crime scene and have some kind of link between Les Manning and a phone number of Stanley Hyman. These pieces are indeed very suspicious.
The Vienna police are interested, but need more to go on. So Ketterman, who's still searching for Les Manning, follows his instincts.
My next step was to go to Coulfont Resort, where Les Manning worked as a maintenance man.
Ketterman learns from the father that not only does Les work there, but there's another employee he should look into.
He stated that his son was hanging out a lot with Ralph Shambaugh Jr., as they worked together.
It's a name Ketterman knows well. Ralph Shambaugh is sitting in the Morgan County Jail for assault with a knife. Ketterman learns that Les disappeared and never even picked up his paycheck.
Didn't call, didn't show up. I have no idea where he is.
Then Ketterman asks about Ralph, Les's friend and co-worker.
Ralph went and quit on me a few weeks back, and I haven't heard from him either.
The police now have the question, what could be the relationship? Was there even a relationship between Stanley and these men from the resort in West Virginia?
And as Ketterman walks out of the lobby, something catches his eye that stops him in his tracks.
I was leaving, and there was a terrarium there with an iguana in it. And it was donated by Stanley and Camille Hyman.
Convinced he's found the missing piece of the puzzle, Ketterman asks about Stanley's connection to the resort.
What can you tell me about Stanley Hyman?
They knew Stanley Hyman quite well, and he frequented there quite a bit. And he always came in, the first person he asked for was Ralph Shambaugh Jr.
Big gun enthusiasts. They hunted up here a lot together. Stanley Hyman did? Yes, sir.
Police had to be excited. They're trying to find out, how can we connect these men together? Connection found.
It's the silver bullet Ketterman is looking for, and he immediately informs Vienna police. Not only is Stanley associating with a known criminal, the 2 men share an interest in guns.
Police pull the phone records. They see that calls started between this pair a month before the murders.
On the night of June 10th, Ralph calls Stanley twice before the murder from Vienna, Virginia, and once a couple hours after.
It's done. The third call that night was made from West Virginia. 4 hours later, more than enough time for that drive to have been made.
Just as police are closing in on Stanley, the unthinkable happens and suddenly turns the investigation on its head. Two months after John Kowalczyk's murder, an investigation that has already been filled with the unexpected is handed one more twist.
the case took another and very tragic turn.
Police learned that John's former in-laws, Stanley and Camille Hyman, who have been vacationing in Florida, are dead. Even more shocking are the circumstances.
This was a murder-suicide, apparently. It looked as though Stanley had shot Camille first and then turned the gun on himself.
They had both left extensive notes explaining what they had done.
In their notes, Stanley and Camille maintained that they would rather end their lives than continue on.
Stanley explains that he's 70 years old. He can't take the stress and the strain of this investigation. And without him, his wife would not want to live her life at all.
Stanley also denies having anything to do with John's murder.
If he had been younger, he would fight to save his innocence and his reputation. He said he had lost the ability to go on.
But Stanley's tragic endgame, in fact, draws even more suspicion his way, as the evidence continues to mount against both him and Ralph Shambaugh Jr.
I gotta talk to you.
The final nail in the coffin comes from another Coulfont employee.
How'd you like to make some easy money?
Chief Deputy Ketterman digs up Lucas Matthews, who says Ralph approached him about helping with the murder.
I got this guy down in Virginia I gotta take out.
What do you mean take
It's not funny, $5,000, I'm serious.
Ralph shows Lucas a picture of the potential victim.
This is the guy.
It's John Kowalczyk. Though Lucas declined, it's clear by now that Ralph is the triggerman, but police are stymied when they try to get anything out of him.
I wanted to interview Ralph Shambaugh, but he was all lawyered up for another case, so his lawyer wouldn't let me talk to him.
No matter. By September 20th, 1993, Commonwealth Attorney Robert Horan presents the evidence against Ralph Shambaugh to a grand jury.
And the grand jury returned a 3-count indictment, one for capital murder, murder for hire, use of a firearm in that murder, and third count is conspiracy to commit the homicide.
They also indict Stanley Hyman posthumously on charges of conspiracy to commit murder. Over 9 months after John's murder, Ralph Shambaugh is extradited to Fairfax County for trial.
To have an arrest made and to have the police confidently lay out what they could to the press about the evidence was a great relief to the community.
At his trial, Ralph maintains his innocence as prosecutors lay out how they believe the murder took place. On June 10, 1993, Ralph and his driver, believed to be Les Manning, arrive near the parking lot shortly before John is scheduled to drop off his son, Ryan.
He went up this alleyway. He knew that the visitation ran from 5 o'clock to 8 o'clock. He knew John would be returning to this location.
Ralph hid in the unlocked building inside a glass door near where they assumed John would park.
Ralph waits there. His gun, which police believe came from Stanley, is loaded with a bullet sheathed in a sabot to render it untraceable. At about 7:45 p.m., John pulls into the lot, parking his truck directly in front of Ralph.
The son, Ryan, gets up, gets out of the truck. He's going to throw his trash away, and he's gone for just a moment.
That time period allows Ralph to come out of the building, approach the truck, shoot John, go back into the building, and then out a back door to the waiting escape car.
Ralph jumps into the car without anyone seeing him.
He drives back to West Virginia because 2.5 hours later, he makes the last phone call from Berkeley Springs, West Virginia, to the residents of Stanley in Northern Virginia. They were business partners, and the business was over.
What Stanley and Ralph don't realize is that Les, the driver, has 2 critical pieces of evidence tucked in his pocket. a book of matches from a nearby Vienna motel, and Stanley's phone number written on a piece of paper. Ralph ends up making a deal with prosecutors after the jury is hung on 2 of the counts.
He came in and pled guilty to first-degree murder as an accessory before the fact.
On March 31st, 1995, Ralph is sentenced to 35 years for the murder of John Kowalczyk.
The community had to breathe a very deep sigh of relief at this point.
There was happiness that this crime got solved, and Vienna had done the job to find out who the killer was.
Brad Lowell and Jacob Lichter, who police had initially investigated, are cleared of any involvement in the crime. As for Les Manning, the man police believe Ralph hired as a driver, the outcome is much more dire.
In a campground, West Virginia investigators found a decomposing body. Dental records prove that that was Les Manning.
Police believe that Ralph and possibly Stanley were involved, but no charges or arrest are ever made. The tragic killing leaves a dark cloud over the community of Vienna.
This was a case that marked them as one of those sad reminders that these kinds of tragedies occur even in places that people think are safe escapes from these kinds of things.
When I travel through Vienna, I always think of John. When I go by the houses he built down the road, I think of John.
And all his friend can feel about it is one emotion.
Sadness about John's family, sadness about Michelle, sadness about John.
The night was supposed to be ordinary. A young college student walking toward an evening class. A quiet campus. A cold January evening. A routine journey that thousands of students had made before. But somewhere between the shadows of a wooded path and the lights of MT Hood Community College, a 19-year-old woman disappeared into a nightmare that would haunt an entire city for more than 4 decades. Her name was Barbara Mae Tucker. And for 41 years, one question refused to die. Who killed Barbara Tucker? January 15, 1980. Gresham, Oregon. The streets were quiet. The kind of quiet that makes a normal night feel frozen in time. Barbara Tucker was a sophomore student studying business management at MT Hood Community College. She was young, independent, and focused on building a future. That evening, Barbara was heading to class. She carried her books. She carried her plans. She carried the simple expectation that she would arrive, attend her lesson, and return home. But she never made it. As Barbara walked near the edge of campus, close to Northeast Kane Drive, something happened in the darkness. Something that investigators would spend decades trying to reconstruct. Witnesses later remembered seeing a young woman suddenly appear near the roadway. She was running. She looked frightened. She appeared desperate. Several drivers passing by saw her movement and believed she was trying to get their attention. Some thought she was waiting for help. Others saw confusion and panic in her actions. For a brief moment, Barbara was visible. She was alive. She was fighting to escape. But the moment passed. The cars continued moving. The night continued. And the person chasing her disappeared back into the shadows. One witness reported seeing a man emerge from a wooded area and move toward Barbara before leading her back toward the campus grounds. At the time, no one knew they were watching the final moments of Barbara Tucker's life. The following morning, students arriving for class discovered something horrifying. Near a wooded area close to the campus parking lot, Barbara's body was found. The 19-year-old student who had left home the night before with books in her hands was gone forever. The discovery sent shockwaves through Gresham. A community that believed its college campus was a safe place suddenly faced a terrifying reality. Someone had attacked a student. Someone had taken a young woman's life. And the person responsible had vanished. Police arrived and immediately began searching for answers. The crime scene contained evidence suggesting Barbara had been sexually assaulted and violently beaten. Investigators collected everything they could. Every piece of evidence mattered. Every footprint. Every trace. Every possible witness. But the most important clue would remain hidden for years. DNA evidence. In 1980, forensic science was nowhere near what it would become decades later. There was no modern genetic genealogy. No massive databases capable of connecting distant relatives. No technology that could transform a tiny biological trace into a name. The investigators had evidence. But they did not have the tools to unlock it. The case became one of Gresham's most disturbing unsolved murders. The years passed. Then decades. Barbara's family waited for answers that never came. Her name remained attached to a file that grew colder with every passing year. The investigation did not disappear. Detectives changed. Technology changed. The world changed. But Barbara Tucker remained 19 years old forever. The city moved forward, but the mystery remained frozen. Who was the man seen near Barbara that night? Why did no one stop? Could the tragedy have been prevented? Those questions became part of the painful legacy left behind by the case. For many cold cases, the passage of time destroys evidence. Witness memories fade. Records disappear. Suspects move away. Some even die before justice arrives. But Barbara Tucker's case contains something that would eventually change everything. A silent witness. DNA. Years after the murder, advances in forensic technology allowed investigators to examine biological evidence collected during the original investigation. The science had caught up with the crime. A genetic profile was developed from evidence connected to the attack. But there was still one enormous problem. The DNA belonged to an unknown person. A name was missing. A face was missing. The killer remained unidentified. The case entered a new era. Investigators began exploring possibilities that had not existed in 1980. Instead of searching only traditional law enforcement databases, they turned toward a revolutionary method that had changed the future of criminal investigations. Genetic genealogy. A technique that could use DNA connections between relatives to build family trees and identify people who were previously invisible to investigators. For years, criminals had believed time was their greatest protection. They believed that if they escaped in the first days, the world would eventually forget. But technology was rewriting the rules. Cold cases that had remained frozen for decades were suddenly moving again. And Barbara Tucker's case was about to experience the same transformation. After more than 40 years of silence, investigators finally began closing in on the person connected to the DNA. A name started to emerge. Robert Arthur Plimpton. A man living in Oregon. A man who had spent decades outside the spotlight. A man investigators believed was connected to the evidence left behind on that cold January night in 1980. The investigation moved carefully. Because after 41 years, police needed more than suspicion. They needed proof. They needed confirmation. They needed the evidence that could finally answer the question Barbara's family had carried for generations. Was this the person who had taken Barbara's life? The answer would come from the same thing that had remained silent for so long. DNA. The smallest trace. The invisible fingerprint left behind by a moment of violence. And after 4 decades, that trace was finally beginning to speak. The case that had once seemed impossible was no longer forgotten. The girl who had disappeared into the darkness of a January night was finally leading investigators back toward the truth. But before justice arrived, there was still one final chapter. A chapter that would begin with surveillance, a discarded piece of evidence, and a moment when investigators realized that the past had finally caught up with the present. Nobody remembers the first lie. They remember the body. Or, in Blackridge's case, they remember the place where a body should have been. For nearly 30 years, people living in the mountain town of Ashridge avoided the old cemetery after sunset. They never admitted why. They blamed the cold, the wolves, the abandoned church that leaned a little farther every winter, the endless fog rolling down Blackridge Road. But every family in town knew the story. Someone had been buried there. Someone who was never found again. And somehow, that impossible mystery became connected to another woman who vanished without leaving so much as a single drop of blood behind. The official records would later describe it in clean, emotionless language. Missing person. Possible abduction. Cold case. Those words were accurate. They just weren't enough. Because what happened on Blackridge Road didn't begin with Emily Carter. It began decades earlier. With a secret that an entire town agreed never to mention. December 18, 1998. Ashridge, Montana. Population, 4,862. 1 grocery store. 1 gas station. 1 sheriff's office. 1 radio station. And more rumors than people. Snow had fallen for 6 straight days. Every rooftop carried a thick blanket of white. Power lines groaned beneath the weight of ice. The forests surrounding the town looked endless, swallowing roads whole after sunset. Locals had a saying. If you get lost in those woods, don't expect the woods to lose you. Nobody laughed when they said it. Emily Carter had heard that sentence her entire life. She never believed it. At 27, Emily had become the youngest late-night radio host in the county. Most evenings, she sat alone inside Studio B of KBRD Radio, speaking into a microphone while the rest of the town slept. She wasn't famous. She wasn't rich. But everyone knew her voice. Warm. Calm. Curious. People trusted her with stories they would never tell the police. Runaways. Secret affairs. Corrupt business deals. Missing livestock. Family feuds. Anonymous confessions. Her midnight program was called The Last Light. The rules were simple. Anyone could call. No names. No questions. No caller ID. Just a voice in the dark. At first, the show was harmless entertainment. Then strange things started happening. Anonymous callers began describing crimes that had never been reported. A man confessed to burning his own barn for insurance money. 3 weeks later, he was arrested. Another caller described stolen jewelry hidden inside a church organ. Deputies searched the church. They found every missing piece. Emily never asked how her callers knew these things. She only listened. Night after night. Hour after hour. Until one voice changed everything. December 21st. 11:43 p.m. Outside, freezing rain struck the studio windows like handfuls of gravel. Inside, Emily adjusted her headphones. "You're on the air." Silence. Static. A faint crackling sound. Then, a man's voice. Old. Slow. Almost whispering. "You're asking the wrong questions." Emily smiled politely. "What should I be asking?" Another pause. Longer this time. Then 6 words. The wrong man was buried there. Emily frowned. Buried where? The answer came immediately. Blackridge Cemetery. Click. The line went dead. No goodbye. No laughter. No explanation. The studio engineer checked the recording. The call had lasted exactly 23 seconds. There was no traceable number. No routing information. Nothing. Emily replayed the tape 5 times before leaving work. Something about the man's voice bothered her. Not fear. Recognition. She couldn't explain why. She just knew she had heard that voice before. Somewhere. Years ago. The next morning, Emily drove to Blackridge Cemetery. Most people hadn't visited it in years. The road leading there had never been repaired after a landslide 15 winters earlier. Tall pines crowded both sides of the narrow gravel path. Snow erased the tire tracks almost as quickly as they appeared. The cemetery itself looked forgotten. Crooked headstones. Broken fences. A rusted iron gate hanging from one hinge. Everything seemed frozen in another century. Emily walked slowly between the graves. Most belonged to miners. Railroad workers. Children who had died before modern medicine reached the valley. Near the back stood a single grave unlike the others. No flowers. No family name. Only one inscription. Samuel Holt. 1940 to 1968. Nothing else. No epitaph. No military honors. No religious symbol. Just a name. Emily photographed it. Then she noticed something strange. Fresh footprints. Only one set. Leading toward the grave. None leading away. She looked around. Nothing. Only wind. Only snow. Only silence. She convinced herself another visitor had arrived before sunrise and their tracks had already filled in. It was the only logical explanation. Still, she couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching. Back at the station, Emily began searching old newspaper archives. December 1968. Samuel Holt. Former deputy sheriff. Killed in a traffic accident during a snowstorm. Case closed. Short article. No photograph. No funeral coverage. Nothing unusual. Except the newspaper after that edition was missing. Not damaged. Missing. Someone had removed every copy from the archive. Emily searched neighboring counties. Same result. Entire editions had disappeared. As though someone wanted one specific week erased from history. The more she searched, the stranger it became. Court records vanished. Property files ended abruptly. Police reports referred to case numbers that no longer existed. One retired librarian finally told her something that made no sense. People stopped asking about Samuel Holt a long time ago. Why? The woman hesitated. Because in Ashridge, hesitation usually meant fear. They were told to. By who? No answer. The librarian quietly locked the archive room. I've already said too much. That evening, Emily returned to the station. She almost canceled her show. Instead, she opened the microphone. This is Emily Carter, and tonight I'd like to ask a question. She paused. If anyone listening knows who Samuel Holt really was, call me. The phone rang before she finished speaking. Not one call. 5. Then 12. Then every line lit up. But something was wrong. Nobody spoke. Every caller remained silent. Emily could hear breathing. Nothing more. Heavy breathing. One line disconnected. Another connected immediately. Breathing again. Then another. And another. For nearly 11 minutes. The entire switchboard filled with silent callers. The station engineer looked pale. We've never seen this before. Emily answered another line. Still breathing. Then. A child. Very softly. Almost too softly to hear. Stop digging. The line went dead. The studio lights flickered. The transmitter shut off. Everything went dark. Emergency power restored the equipment 30 seconds later. Every phone line was empty. Every recording had vanished. As if the calls had never happened. 3 days later, Emily Carter left the station after finishing her Christmas Eve broadcast. She smiled at the overnight janitor. She carried a canvas shoulder bag, a cassette recorder, her car keys, and a folder labeled Blackridge. She drove east toward Blackridge Road. At 11:17 p.m., another blizzard swept across the valley. Visibility dropped to less than 50 feet. Drivers pulled onto the shoulder. Snow covered the highway. The last confirmed sighting of Emily came from a truck driver passing mile marker 14. He later told investigators something that never appeared in the official report. Emily wasn't alone. Someone was sitting in the passenger seat. The trucker couldn't identify whether it was a man or a woman. Only one detail stood out. The passenger wore what looked like an old sheriff's uniform. By sunrise, Emily Carter had vanished without a trace. Her car would be found hours later on Blackridge Road. The engine was still warm. The headlights were still on. The driver's door stood open. Fresh snow covered everything around the vehicle. There were no footprints. No signs of a struggle. No blood. No fingerprints. No cassette recorder. No folder marked BLACKRIDGE. Only one object remained inside the car. An antique silver pocket watch. Its hands had stopped forever at 11:23 p.m. Engraved inside the cover were 6 words that would ignite one of the most baffling criminal investigations in American history. Truth never stays buried forever. The first thing Sheriff Daniel Mercer noticed wasn't the abandoned car. It was the silence. Not the ordinary silence of a mountain road buried beneath fresh snow. A different kind. The kind that settles over a place after something terrible has already happened. The patrol lights swept across Blackridge Road just after dawn, painting the frozen forest in alternating flashes of blue and red. Snow continued falling in thick, lazy sheets, covering every inch of asphalt, every branch, every fence post. It was as if the storm itself had arrived to erase the night. Emily Carter's sedan sat crooked against the shoulder. The engine had finally died. The headlights still burned weakly through a layer of ice. The driver's door stood wide open. Mercer approached slowly. No footprints. Not one. His deputies spread out with measuring tapes and cameras, but the deeper they searched, the stranger the scene became. Fresh snow covered everything in an unbroken blanket. If Emily had climbed out of the car, there should have been tracks. If someone had forced her inside another vehicle, there should have been tracks. If an animal had dragged her into the woods, there should have been tracks. There were none. It looked as though she had simply disappeared into the freezing air. Inside the vehicle, nothing appeared disturbed. Her purse remained on the passenger seat. Her wallet still contained cash. Her driver's license. Credit cards. Even the keys were still in the ignition. Robbery made no sense. The heater was still set to maximum. Half a cup of untouched coffee rested in the holder beside the gearshift. The radio remained tuned to KBRD. Her own station. Mercer leaned closer. Something silver reflected beneath the dashboard. A pocket watch. Heavy. Old. Its polished surface showed almost no wear despite its obvious age. He pressed the latch. The lid clicked open. Inside, the tiny hands had frozen forever at exactly 11:23. Below the clock face was an inscription. Truth never stays buried forever. Mercer stared for several seconds. None of the deputies recognized the object. No manufacturer. No initials. Nothing connecting it to Emily. It looked less like evidence and more like a message. By noon, news of Emily's disappearance had spread across Ashridge. The grocery store emptied. Parents picked children up from school early. Businesses locked their doors before sunset. People who hadn't spoken in years suddenly found reasons to visit one another. Everyone asked the same question. How could someone vanish from the middle of an open road? Without witnesses. Without evidence. Without leaving a single footprint. Television crews from neighboring counties began arriving before nightfall. Satellite trucks lined Main Street. Reporters repeated the same headline. Popular radio host missing during Christmas blizzard. For the first 24 hours, investigators believed Emily might still be alive. Search teams entered the forest. Snowmobiles covered logging trails. Volunteers formed long human chains stretching across frozen fields. Helicopters equipped with thermal cameras flew overhead whenever the weather briefly cleared. Nothing. Dogs tracked Emily's scent for nearly 400 yards before stopping abruptly in the center of Blackridge Road. The handlers tried again. Same result. The scent simply ended, as though she had vanished into thin air. Inside the sheriff's office, Mercer spread photographs across the conference table. Emily's abandoned car. The pocket watch. The cemetery. Samuel Holt's grave. The anonymous radio transcript. Each clue seemed connected. Yet none of them explained the disappearance. Deputy Lisa Navarro broke the silence. You think whoever called the station took her? Mercer didn't answer immediately. Instead, he replayed the final broadcast. Emily's voice filled the room. If anyone listening knows who Samuel Holt really was, call me. Then came the recordings. Silence. Heavy breathing. One disconnected call after another. Finally, the child's voice. Stop digging. Every detective in the room listened without speaking. When the recording ended, nobody moved. Navarro finally whispered, "Kids don't sound like that." Mercer looked up. "What do you mean?" "I've got 2 sons." She swallowed. That wasn't fear. It sounded rehearsed. Investigators soon discovered Emily hadn't been working alone. Hidden inside her apartment was a locked metal filing cabinet. It required a warrant to open. When technicians finally forced it open, they found dozens of folders, each carefully labeled. 1968 fire. Railway collapse. Missing minors. County elections. Samuel Holt. Emily had spent nearly 2 years investigating old events nobody else seemed interested in remembering. One notebook immediately caught Mercer's attention. The final pages had been written only hours before she vanished. Most sentences were crossed out. Several pages had been torn away. Only fragments remained. Holt wasn't the first. The cemetery is only part of. Someone still alive knows. Then one sentence, written so hard the pen had nearly pierced the paper. Don't trust the original report. Mercer searched every police archive. There was only one problem. The original report no longer existed. The disappearance soon attracted outside attention. State investigators arrived. The FBI offered assistance. Behavioral analysts reviewed every interview. Profiler Nathan Holloway delivered an opinion that divided the task force. This wasn't spontaneous. He pointed toward photographs covering the wall. Everything was staged. The abandoned car. The watch. The missing cassette recorder. The anonymous phone calls. Someone wanted investigators looking in a very specific direction. Mercer folded his arms. So where shouldn't we be looking? Holloway smiled faintly. Exactly. Days became weeks. No ransom demand arrived. No confirmed sightings. No financial activity. Emily's bank account remained untouched. Her passport stayed inside her apartment. Friends insisted she would never leave voluntarily. Her parents refused to believe she was dead. Every Christmas afterward, Emily's mother left the porch light on until sunrise. Just in case. Then came the first crack in the mystery. A teenager hiking near Blackridge Creek found a cassette tape buried beneath several inches of snow. Its plastic casing was cracked. One side had melted slightly, as though someone had tried to burn it before abandoning it. Evidence technicians cleaned the tape for nearly 3 days. When they finally played it, the room fell silent. At first there was only static. Wind. Footsteps crunching through snow. Emily's breathing. She was alive when the recording began. Her voice sounded nervous. If someone finds this, don't believe. The sentence ended abruptly. A loud metallic bang echoed through the recording. Then another sound. A second voice. Male. Calm. Older. You weren't supposed to find it. Emily whispered something impossible to hear. The man answered. You've opened the wrong grave. Silence. The tape continued running for almost 40 seconds. Then, a gunshot. Not close. Far away. Followed immediately by Emily screaming. The recording stopped. No further audio existed. The cassette transformed the investigation overnight. Now detectives knew one thing for certain. Emily had not disappeared willingly. Someone had confronted her. Someone who knew about Samuel Holt. Someone who believed a grave had been opened. The obvious question became unavoidable. Had someone secretly exhumed Holt's grave? Sheriff Mercer obtained permission to inspect the cemetery. Christmas morning. Before sunrise. Snow continued falling as workers removed frozen earth from around Samuel Holt's headstone. The process took hours. By afternoon, they reached the coffin. Mercer personally ordered the lid opened. Every deputy stood watching. Nobody spoke. The crowbar slipped beneath the rusted nails. Wood cracked. The lid slowly lifted. Inside, there was no skeleton. No clothing. No coffin lining. Nothing. Only damp soil. And lying in the center, another silver pocket watch. Its hands had also stopped. This one. At 11:23. The cemetery fell silent the moment the coffin was opened. No one spoke. No one moved. The wind, which had howled through the pine trees all morning, suddenly seemed to disappear, leaving behind an eerie stillness that made every breath sound unnaturally loud. Sheriff Daniel Mercer stared into the empty coffin, his flashlight beam sweeping across weathered wood darkened by decades of moisture. Nothing. No skeleton. No clothing. No fragments of bone. Only damp earth. And the silver pocket watch resting in the center like someone had placed it there only moments earlier. Deputy Lisa Navarro swallowed hard. That's impossible. Mercer didn't answer. Crime scene photographer Ethan Brooks climbed into the grave, photographing every inch before carefully lifting the watch into an evidence bag. It felt warm. Not room temperature. Warm. Brooks frowned. It can't be. He looked toward Mercer. I swear this thing is warm. Nobody laughed. The evidence technician checked it with an infrared thermometer. 29 degrees Celsius. Nearly 85 degrees Fahrenheit. The surrounding soil measured barely 2 degrees above freezing. No explanation. The watch was sealed inside an evidence container and transported to the sheriff's office under constant supervision. By evening, the forensic laboratory confirmed something even stranger. There were no fingerprints. Not old ones. Not recent ones. Not even partial smudges. The polished silver surface looked as though it had never been touched by human skin. Meanwhile, investigators widened their search around Black Ridge Cemetery. Ground-penetrating radar scanned the frozen earth. Most of the cemetery appeared undisturbed. Until one technician noticed an unusual void beneath the oldest section. Not a grave. A tunnel. Mercer ordered excavation immediately. Workers spent 6 exhausting hours removing frozen soil before uncovering a rusted iron hatch concealed beneath layers of rock and roots. The hinges resisted at first. Then, with one violent pull, the hatch opened. A blast of stale air escaped from below. It smelled of damp stone, old wood, rust, and something else. Something metallic. Blood. The sheriff descended first. His flashlight revealed a narrow brick corridor extending beneath the cemetery. The walls were lined with ancient electrical cables no longer connected to anything. Water dripped steadily from the ceiling. 20 feet ahead, the tunnel widened into a chamber. The room looked untouched for decades. An iron desk, dust-covered filing cabinets, wooden shelves filled with boxes, old lanterns, medical equipment from another era, and on the far wall, hundreds of photographs. Every picture showed a different person. Men, women, teenagers, children. None smiled. Every face stared directly into the camera. Every photograph carried a handwritten date. The oldest. The newest. December 23, 1998. Emily Carter. The photograph had clearly been taken without her knowledge. She stood outside KBRD radio carrying the same folder labeled BLACKRIDGE. Someone had been watching her. Deputy Navarro carefully opened one of the filing cabinets. Inside were dozens of folders, each marked with a person's name. Many names matched photographs on the wall. Some files ended with a single word stamped in red ink. Closed. Others bore another. Missing. Mercer froze. There, halfway through the cabinet, he found one final folder. His own name. Daniel Mercer. The file contained photographs spanning nearly 15 years. Mercer leading the academy. Mercer attending his father's funeral. Mercer buying groceries. Mercer coaching Little League. Someone had documented his life in extraordinary detail. The final photograph had been taken only 2 days earlier. It showed Mercer standing beside Emily's abandoned car, which meant whoever created the file had been watching the investigation in real time. Before anyone could process what they had discovered, the lights on every flashlight flickered simultaneously. One by one, they went dark. The tunnel disappeared into complete blackness. Someone whispered, "I heard that." "What?" "Footsteps." Mercer raised his service pistol. The darkness swallowed every sound except slow, measured footsteps approaching from somewhere deeper inside the tunnel. 1, 2, 3. They stopped. Then came the unmistakable click of an old tape recorder. A familiar voice echoed through the darkness. "Emily Carter. If you're hearing this, I'm already gone." The recording crackled. "I thought I was investigating a missing deputy. I was wrong. This town isn't hiding one murder. It's hiding an entire history." Her breathing grew faster. "They've been replacing people." A loud bang interrupted the tape. Emily gasped. "I know who they are now." Silence. Then the recording ended with one final sentence. "They're standing behind you." Every deputy turned instinctively. Nothing. Only darkness. Only silence. Then, a gunshot erupted from somewhere inside the tunnel. The echo rolled beneath the cemetery like thunder. Someone screamed. And in the confusion, the evidence box containing the silver pocket watch vanished. The gunshot changed everything. Before that moment, the Blackridge investigation was a missing person case. A disappearance. A mystery. A search for a woman who might still be alive. After the gunshot beneath the cemetery, it became something else. A war. Because whoever had been hiding beneath Blackridge Cemetery was no longer hiding. They were watching. And they wanted the investigators to know it. The first thing Sheriff Daniel Mercer heard after the gunshot was shouting. Deputies yelling names. Flashlights moving violently through the darkness. Boots crushing against the wet stone floor. For several seconds, nobody knew what had happened. The sound had echoed so violently through the underground chamber that it was impossible to determine where it came from. Mercer immediately ordered everyone out. No evidence was worth risking another life. One by one, the investigators climbed back through the iron hatch and returned to the surface. The snow was still falling. The cemetery looked exactly the same. Quiet. Empty. Almost peaceful. But Mercer knew better. Something had been hidden beneath that ground for decades. And someone had just tried to protect it. The forensic team searched the tunnel again before sunrise. This time, they found something they had missed. A second entrance. Hidden behind a false brick wall. The passage led away from the cemetery and continued nearly half a mile beneath the forest before ending near an abandoned mining road. Whoever built it had planned carefully. Multiple exits. Hidden rooms. Storage areas. Observation points. This wasn't a secret hiding place. It was an operation. A system. For years, someone had been collecting information on the people of Ashridge. Watching them. Recording them. Following their lives. The question was no longer, who kidnapped Emily Carter? The question became, how many people had disappeared before anyone noticed? The answer came from a box discovered inside the underground chamber. A box that had been hidden beneath the floorboards. Inside were dozens of documents. Old newspaper clippings. Handwritten reports. Photographs. And missing persons files. Many of them had never appeared in official records. People who vanished. Workers. Teenagers. Travelers. Witnesses. Individuals whose disappearances had been explained away as accidents, runaway cases, or simple bad luck. But according to the documents, they were connected. All of them had discovered something. All of them had gotten too close. At the center of every file was the same symbol. A circle crossed by 3 lines. No name. No organization. Only the symbol. Sheriff Mercer spent the next 48 hours reviewing every document. The more he read, the more disturbed he became. Because one name appeared repeatedly. Samuel Holt. The former deputy sheriff. The man supposedly killed in 1968. The man whose coffin contained nothing. The man whose name started Emily's investigation. According to the hidden records, Holt wasn't just a deputy. He had been investigating corruption inside Ashridge's local government. Illegal land deals. Missing evidence. Manipulated police reports. He had collected proof. Then, suddenly, he disappeared. The official story said he died in a car accident during a snowstorm. But the documents suggested something different. Holt had uncovered something. Something powerful enough to erase a person from history. Then investigators found the photograph. A photograph that changed the entire case. It was taken in 1970, 2 years after Samuel Holt's reported death. The image showed a group of men standing outside an old courthouse. 6 people. 5 were identified. A judge. A businessman. A police officer. A construction owner. A county official. The 6th person was partially hidden in shadow. But detectives noticed one detail. The man was wearing a sheriff's badge. The same badge design used by Samuel Holt. Mercer stared at the photograph for several minutes. "That's impossible." Deputy Navarro looked at him. "Why?" "Because if that's Holt..." He paused. "Then someone has been lying for 30 years. The investigation took another unexpected turn when Emily's apartment was searched again. This time, detectives found something hidden beneath the floorboards. A small recording device. Battery-powered. Still working. It contained only one file. Recorded 3 days before Emily disappeared. Her voice sounded exhausted. She wasn't speaking for the radio. She was speaking to someone privately. "I know you're listening." A long pause. "If anything happens to me, this recording proves I was right." Another pause. "The person everyone thinks is dead never died." The recording continued. Emily's voice became quieter. "He changed his identity. He built a new life. And he's been protecting the secret ever since." A chair moved. Someone entered the room. Emily stopped speaking. A man's voice could be heard. Calm. Controlled. "You should have stopped looking." The recording ended. Investigators immediately tried to identify the voice. Audio specialists enhanced the recording. They removed background noise. Separated frequencies. Compared it against known voices. The result was inconclusive. But one expert noticed something unusual. The man's speech pattern. The rhythm. The pauses. The way he pronounced certain words. It sounded familiar. Very familiar. After hours of comparison, the analyst finally made a statement that shocked the team. "I've heard this voice before." Mercer looked up. "Where?" The analyst hesitated. "In old police recordings." He placed a file on the desk. A recording from 1968. A young deputy giving testimony about Samuel Holt's death. The voice belonged to a man named Thomas Voss. Thomas Voss had been Samuel Holt's partner. The last person officially known to see him alive. After Holt's death, Voss left law enforcement. He disappeared from public life. No interviews. No photographs. No media attention. For 30 years, nobody had asked where he went. Because everyone believed the story. Samuel Holt was dead. The case was closed. But now, investigators had a different possibility. Samuel Holt may have survived, and Thomas Voss may have been the only person who knew the truth. A search began immediately. Records showed Thomas Voss had changed his name in 1985, moved across several states, worked various jobs, always keeping a low profile. But there was one discovery that made Mercer stop. For the last 12 years, Thomas Voss had lived less than 40 miles from Ashridge, under another name. A quiet man, a respected community member, someone nobody suspected, someone who had been watching the town from the shadows. At 3:12 a.m., investigators arrived at the address. An old farmhouse surrounded by pine trees. No lights. No vehicles. No movement. Mercer approached the front door. Inside, everything looked abandoned. Dust covered the furniture. The kitchen table contained untouched food. The bedroom closet was empty. He had left. But not long ago. On the wall above the fireplace hung a single photograph. A young Samuel Holt, standing beside a younger Thomas Voss. Both wearing sheriff uniforms. Both smiling. Behind the photograph was a handwritten note. Only one sentence. You found the grave. Now find the man. And beneath it, another message, written in a different handwriting. Emily already did. The investigation had begun as a search for a missing radio host. Now it had become a hunt for a man who had been officially dead for 30 years. And somewhere in the darkness outside Ashridge, someone was still watching. Someone who knew exactly how this story would end. The farmhouse was empty. But Sheriff Daniel Mercer knew immediately that nobody had truly left. Not in a hurry. Not in panic. The person who lived there had not escaped. They had prepared. Every drawer was organized. Every document removed. Every personal item carefully taken away. No fingerprints. No photographs. No family records. Nothing that could reveal who Thomas Voss had become. It wasn't the disappearance of a frightened man. It was the disappearance of someone who had spent decades preparing for this exact moment. The moment when someone finally came looking. The investigation into Thomas Voss became the center of the largest manhunt Ashridge had ever seen. His photograph appeared on every news station. His name appeared on every highway sign. For the first time in 30 years, the quiet former deputy who had vanished from public attention became the most wanted man in the region. But there was a problem. Nobody knew what he looked like anymore. The only photographs available were decades old. A young police officer. Dark hair. Sharp features. A confident smile. But the man investigators were searching for would now be nearly 70 years old. Gray hair. Different appearance. Different identity. A ghost walking among ordinary people. As investigators searched deeper into Voss's past, they discovered something disturbing. He had never truly disappeared. He had simply changed roles. In every town where he lived, people remembered him differently. A volunteer firefighter. A school board member. A church fundraiser. A quiet neighbor. Someone reliable. Someone trustworthy. The kind of person nobody suspected. That detail troubled Mercer more than anything else. because it meant Voss wasn't hiding from society. He was becoming part of it. Meanwhile, forensic teams continued examining the underground chamber beneath Blackridge Cemetery. The discoveries kept coming. A hidden camera system. Old surveillance equipment. Hundreds of audio recordings. Thousands of photographs. The chamber wasn't a tomb. It was an archive. A place where someone collected people's secrets. Investigators found recordings dating back nearly 50 years. Private conversations. Telephone calls. Meetings. Confessions. Arguments. The unknown person behind the operation had spent decades documenting the lives of Ashridge residents. But why? That question remained unanswered. Until one recording surfaced. A recording labeled December 1968, Holt. The audio quality was terrible. Static covered most of the conversation. But one voice was unmistakable. Samuel Holt. The missing deputy. The man who supposedly died. His voice sounded weak. Tired. But alive. You don't understand what you started. Another voice responded. You should have stayed quiet. Holt replied. People deserve the truth. A loud noise interrupted the recording. Then silence. The final seconds contained only one sentence. A sentence that changed the entire investigation. Holt whispered. If anything happens to me, don't trust Voss. For decades, Thomas Voss had been considered Samuel Holt's closest partner. His friend. His colleague. The man who reported his death. Now investigators had to consider a terrifying possibility. Voss wasn't protecting Holt's secret. He may have been the reason Holt disappeared. The discovery created chaos inside the department. Some investigators believed Voss was the mastermind behind everything. Others believed there was someone above him. Someone with more influence. More power. Someone capable of controlling police records, court files, and public information for decades. Mercer focused on one detail. The symbol. The circle crossed by 3 lines. It appeared everywhere. On old documents. On photographs. Inside the underground chamber. He ordered analysts to investigate its origin. The answer came 3 days later. The symbol belonged to a forgotten organization from the late 1960s. A private group of wealthy businessmen and local officials. Officially, it never existed. No public records. No membership lists. No headquarters. But old newspaper articles revealed one thing. The group had controlled nearly every major development project in Ashridge. Roads. Mining. Land ownership. Construction contracts. And every person who investigated them eventually disappeared. Then came another breakthrough. A fingerprint recovered from an old document inside the chamber was successfully processed. It belonged to a man named Richard Vail. A respected businessman. Founder of Vail Mountain Industries. One of the wealthiest men in Montana. And one of the men standing beside Thomas Voss in the 1970 photograph. But Richard Vail had one problem. He had died in 1987. Or at least, that was what the record said. Mercer reviewed the death certificate. The signature. The medical report. The burial records. Everything appeared legitimate. Except one detail. The doctor who signed the certificate had disappeared 2 years later. The funeral director had moved away. The cemetery records were incomplete. The more Mercer looked, the more he realized. The entire history of Ashridge had been built on missing pieces. Then, on a freezing February morning, investigators received a call. A woman claimed she knew where Emily Carter was. She refused to give her name. She refused to meet at the sheriff's office. She only gave one location: an abandoned railway station outside town. Mercer arrived with armed deputies. The station had been abandoned for 20 years. Broken windows. Rusting tracks. A waiting room covered in dust. The woman was there. An elderly woman wearing a dark coat. She introduced herself as Margaret Ellis. And she carried something investigators had been searching for since Emily vanished. Emily's missing folder. The one labeled Blackridge. Mercer stared at it. "Where did you get this?" Margaret looked toward the dark railway tunnel. Her answer was quiet. "Emily gave it to me." The entire team froze. Mercer stepped closer. "When?" The woman looked terrified. "After she disappeared." Silence. Nobody moved. Mercer lowered his voice. "Are you saying Emily is alive?" Margaret looked at him. Then whispered, "No." A pause. "She was alive when she gave me this." She opened the folder. Inside were dozens of pages. Maps. Names. Photographs. And one final handwritten note from Emily. Only 4 words. "The killer is inside." Mercer looked up. "Inside what?" Margaret's hands trembled. The investigation. Before anyone could ask another question, the lights in the railway station went out. A shadow moved behind the broken glass. A gunshot exploded through the darkness. Margaret collapsed. The folder fell to the floor. And as deputies rushed outside, they found fresh footprints in the snow, leading away from the station. But the footprints were not from someone running. They were calm, slow, controlled, like someone who knew nobody would catch them. At the end of the trail was a single object: a silver pocket watch. Its hands had stopped. Again. The second pocket watch was not a coincidence. Sheriff Daniel Mercer had stopped believing in coincidences a long time ago. In law enforcement, patterns mattered. A repeated name. A repeated location. A repeated mistake. But this was different. This was a message. Someone had left the watch knowing exactly what investigators would think. Knowing they would connect it to the cemetery. Knowing they would connect it to Emily Carter. The question was no longer whether the killer wanted to be found. The question was why. Margaret Ellis survived the shooting. Barely. The bullet missed her heart by less than an inch. Doctors told investigators it was a miracle she was alive. But when Mercer entered her hospital room 2 days later, he realized something immediately. Margaret wasn't afraid of dying. She was afraid of talking. Her hands shook as she held a cup of water. "You know who did this," Mercer said. Margaret stared at the window. Snow covered the glass. I know who started it. Mercer leaned forward. Started what? She closed her eyes. The lie. Margaret Ellis had worked at Ashridge County Archives for nearly 40 years. She was the person responsible for preserving the town's history. Old newspapers, government records, property documents, death certificates. She knew every secret hidden inside those walls. And that was exactly why Emily trusted her. According to Margaret, Emily had discovered something impossible while researching Samuel Holt. The official record said Holt died in December 1968. But Margaret had found another document. A document that had never been entered into the archive system. A police transfer report. Dated January 1969. 1 month after Holt's supposed death. The report listed Samuel Holt as an active deputy. Not deceased. Not retired. Active. Someone had changed history. Emily had spent weeks following the trail. She discovered missing pages from police reports. Altered court records. Fake signatures. Entire cases that had been rewritten. And at the center of everything was a secret investigation Samuel Holt had started before he disappeared. An investigation into a group known only as the Blackridge Circle. Margaret explained that the group wasn't a traditional criminal organization. There were no weapons meetings, no secret rituals, no obvious crimes. They operated differently. They controlled information. They controlled reputations. They controlled what people believed. A business owner could disappear from public records. A crime could be classified as an accident. A witness could suddenly change their story. The truth wasn't destroyed. It was replaced. And according to Margaret, Samuel Holt discovered it too late. Who was in the Blackridge Circle? Mercer asked. Margaret looked at him. You already know some of them. She named the people from the photograph. Richard Vale. Thomas Voss. Judge Harold Whitmore. Sheriff Alan Briggs. Construction owner Victor Kane. 5 powerful men who shaped Ashridge for decades. But there was one more name. One that had never appeared in any photograph. One that Margaret had kept hidden. Who? She whispered. Daniel Mercer. The room became silent. Mercer stared at her. Me? Margaret nodded slowly. Your father. For several seconds, Mercer said nothing. His father, William Mercer, had been a respected sheriff. A local hero. A man whose portrait still hung inside the sheriff's office. He died when Daniel was 22. Everyone remembered him as honest. Fair. A protector. But Margaret's words opened a door Mercer had spent his entire life refusing to look behind. Why would my father be involved? Margaret looked away. Because he wasn't trying to destroy the circle. A pause. He was trying to escape it. That night, Mercer returned to his childhood home. The house had belonged to his father. It had remained untouched since his death. For the first time in decades, Daniel opened the locked wooden cabinet in his father's study. Inside were old police files, personal notes, photographs, and one envelope with his name written across the front. Daniel. The letter inside was dated 3 days before his father's death. The handwriting was unmistakable. His father's. If you are reading this, then they know you are looking. Mercer's breathing slowed. He continued. I spent my life protecting this town. I believed I could change things from inside. I was wrong. The next sentence was underlined. The person you trust most may be the person who knows the least. Then, never believe the official story. Inside the envelope was another photograph. A photograph Daniel had never seen before. It showed his father standing beside Samuel Holt. Not in uniform. Not at work. Somewhere underground. In the same chamber beneath Blackridge Cemetery. The date printed on the back made Mercer freeze. December 24, 1968. 6 days after Samuel Holt's reported death. His father wasn't investigating the secret. He was part of it. At least, for a moment. The next morning, Mercer returned to the sheriff's office. He said nothing about the photograph. He said nothing about his father. Instead, he continued reviewing Emily's files. Then he found something hidden in the folder Margaret had recovered. A map. Not of Blackridge Cemetery. Not of the underground tunnels. A map of Ashridge. With dozens of locations marked. Schools. Homes. Businesses. Government buildings. And one location circled in red. The sheriff's office. A note was written beside it. The last light is always inside the house. That afternoon, a new piece of evidence arrived. A security camera from a private business had captured a figure walking near the railway station after Margaret was shot. The image quality was poor. The person wore a long coat. A hat. The face was hidden. But the investigators noticed one detail. The person stopped directly beneath a streetlight. Almost deliberately. As if wanting the camera to see them. The image was enhanced. The face slowly became visible. Everyone in the room went silent. Because the person standing beneath the light was not Thomas Voss. It was not a stranger. It was someone they had already interviewed. Someone who had been helping the investigation from the beginning. Someone who had access to every piece of evidence. Deputy Lisa Navarro stared at the screen. Her own face appeared beside the photograph. The person in the image was wearing her jacket, her hat, her identification badge. But Navarro was standing in the sheriff's office when the photograph was taken. Mercer looked at the timestamp. 3:14 a.m. The exact moment Navarro claimed she was asleep at home. The investigation was collapsing from the inside. Someone was impersonating officers. Someone was manipulating evidence. Someone knew every move before investigators made it. Then the phone rang. A direct emergency line. Mercer answered. No voice. Only static. Then, a familiar sound. A tape recorder clicking on. Emily's voice. Weak. Whispering. If you're hearing this. A pause. They know you're close. Mercer grabbed the phone tighter. Emily? Silence. Then. Don't trust anyone wearing a badge. The recording ended. But before the line disconnected, one final sound was heard. A door opening, and a man's voice saying, "Bring him to the basement." The call ended. Mercer slowly lowered the receiver, because he knew that voice. Everyone in the room knew that voice. It belonged to the person who had been leading the investigation from the beginning. The person who had promised to help find Emily Carter. The person who had just become the investigation's most dangerous suspect. Sheriff Daniel Mercer looked toward Deputy Navarro. And for the first time since Emily disappeared, he wondered if they had been searching for the wrong enemy all along. For the first time in his career, Sheriff Daniel Mercer locked his own office door from the inside. Not because he was afraid of criminals outside. Not because he was worried about an unknown killer hiding somewhere in Ashridge. He was afraid of the people standing beside him. The people wearing the same badge. The people who had sworn the same oath. Because the evidence was becoming impossible to ignore. Someone inside the investigation had been manipulating everything. Someone had access to evidence. Access to reports. Access to witnesses. Access to every move the police made. And now, someone had used Deputy Lisa Navarro's identity. Navarro demanded an explanation. She stood in the center of the conference room while every investigator watched her. "This is insane." Nobody answered. The photograph was displayed on the screen. The figure beneath the streetlight. The same jacket. The same hat. The same badge. Mercer looked at her carefully. "Where were you at 3:14 a.m.? Navarro stared at him. "You think I did this?" "I asked where you were." A long silence. Finally, she answered. "Home." "Anyone confirm that?" Her expression changed. Just slightly. But Mercer noticed. "No." That single word changed the room. Because in an investigation filled with missing evidence and false identities, an unverified alibi was dangerous. Navarro immediately offered to surrender her weapon. Mercer refused. Not because he trusted her. Because he didn't know who to trust anymore. Instead, he ordered a complete internal review. Every officer. Every report. Every piece of evidence. Nothing was considered reliable. The Blackridge investigation had become a crime scene itself. Then investigators discovered something hidden inside the evidence room. A second file. A file that had never been logged. No barcode. No case number. No official record. Just a black folder placed behind a cabinet. Inside were photographs. Hundreds of them. Not from the underground chamber. New photographs. Recent ones. The investigators. The search teams. The crime scenes. Every moment since Emily disappeared. Someone had been documenting the investigation from the inside. One photograph stopped Mercer completely. It showed him sitting alone in his office, reading his father's letter. The picture had been taken through the window. From outside. The timestamp. Yesterday. The search for the photographer led detectives back to Blackridge Cemetery. Near the old church, they found a hidden camera. Still active. Still recording. The memory card contained 3 months of footage. But the final video was only 17 seconds long. It showed a person approaching the camera. The face remained hidden. The figure reached toward the lens. Then spoke. A distorted voice. You keep looking for the person who buried the truth. A pause. But you never ask who dug it up. The camera went black. That sentence changed the direction of the entire investigation. Who dug up the truth? Mercer returned to Samuel Holt's records. The empty coffin. The fake death. The missing reports. The hidden tunnels. What if the biggest secret wasn't that Holt survived? What if someone had intentionally created the legend of his death? What if Samuel Holt wasn't the victim? What if he was the architect? The possibilities seemed impossible. Until they found the missing police report. Not a copy. The original. Hidden inside a false compartment beneath the old sheriff's office floor. The report was dated December 24, 1968. The night Samuel Holt supposedly died. The first page described a car accident. The second page was different. It contained handwritten notes from William Mercer, Daniel's father. The final line read, Holt knows everything. We cannot let him leave Ashridge. Daniel read the sentence over and over. His father's handwriting. His father's words. His father's secret. The man he had spent his entire life admiring had been involved. That evening, Mercer confronted the past. He visited the abandoned home of Thomas Voss. Again. This time, he searched deeper. Behind a wall panel in the basement, he found a hidden room. Inside was not money. Not weapons. Not stolen documents. Something far more disturbing. A recording studio. Old microphones. Tape machines. Hundreds of labeled recordings. Each one marked with a name. Emily Carter. Margaret Ellis. Daniel Mercer. Lisa Navarro. The entire town. Someone had been listening. Recording. Waiting. At the center of the room was a final tape. No name. Only a date. December 24, 1968. Mercer played it. At first, only static. Then voices. Several men. Angry. Panicked. Samuel Holt was there. You don't understand what you've created. Another voice answered. This town belongs to us. Holt replied. No town belongs to anyone. A loud crash. Someone shouted. Then a younger version of Daniel's father's voice. William Mercer. Samuel, stop. Silence. Then Holt whispered. You knew. The recording ended. Mercer stood motionless. His entire understanding of his father collapsed. But then something unexpected happened. The tape continued. A second recording had been attached. Recorded decades later. A different voice. Older. Weak. Samuel Holt. Alive. If you're hearing this, they failed. Mercer froze. The voice continued. I spent 30 years trying to expose them. A pause. But I made one mistake. The circle was never the organization. The circle was the distraction. Mercer's heartbeat increased. What does that mean? The recording answered. Look at the person who benefits from every investigation. Static. Then. The person who finds the clues. The person who controls the evidence. The person everyone trusts. The tape stopped. Mercer returned to the sheriff's office. He immediately searched personnel files. He reviewed every person involved. Every decision. Every discovery. Every lucky breakthrough. Then he noticed something. A pattern. Every major clue in the case had been discovered shortly after one person arrived. One person who had no reason to be there. One person who claimed to have been searching for the truth. One person who always appeared just before another secret was uncovered. The FBI consultant. Nathan Holloway. Mercer checked Holloway's background. The file was incomplete. Too incomplete. A career investigator with no childhood records. No family history. No education records before age 25. A man who seemed to appear from nowhere. Mercer searched deeper. And found something impossible. A photograph from 1972. Blackridge County. The image showed members of a local investigation team standing in front of the sheriff's office. Among them, a young man. The same face. The same eyes. The same person. Nathan Holloway. 46 years earlier. Mercer stared at the photograph. The room felt colder. Because suddenly the mystery had a new center. Not Samuel Holt. Not Thomas Voss. Not the Blackridge Circle. Nathan Holloway. The man who had spent months helping them uncover the truth. May have been the person hiding it. Then Mercer's phone rang. Unknown number. He answered. No voice. Only breathing. Then a whisper. Daniel. He froze. Nobody called him that anymore. Not at work. Not professionally. Only one person used that name. His father. The voice continued. You finally opened the right door. Mercer couldn't speak. Then came the final sentence. A sentence that changed everything. Your father didn't betray Samuel Holt. A pause. He saved him. The call ended. And somewhere outside the sheriff's office, the old church bell at Blackridge Cemetery began ringing. Even though the church had been abandoned for 30 years. The church bell rang 13 times. Not 12. Not the number expected from a normal clock. 13. A sound that should not have existed. Because Blackridge Chapel had been abandoned since 1969. The wooden structure had no electricity. No working clock. No caretaker. No reason for anything inside that building to move. Yet every person standing outside the sheriff's office heard it. And every person understood the same thing. Someone wanted them to go there. Sheriff Daniel Mercer arrived at Blackridge Chapel less than 20 minutes later. He went alone. Not because he wanted to. Because he no longer knew who he could trust. The snow-covered road reflected the headlights as he drove through the darkness. The old cemetery appeared exactly as it had for generations. Silent. Frozen. Waiting. The chapel stood at the edge of the graveyard, its wooden walls damaged by decades of storms. The front door was slightly open. Mercer stopped. He reached for his flashlight. Then his weapon. Inside, the air smelled of dust and old wood. The church pews were covered in white sheets. The altar was cracked. The stained glass windows were broken. But in the center of the room, someone had placed a table. On the table was a tape recorder. And beside it, a photograph. Mercer picked it up. His hands immediately tightened. The photograph showed his father, William Mercer, standing inside the same chapel. But the date written on the back made his blood run cold. January 14, 1969. 1 month after Samuel Holt's supposed death. His father had been here. After everything. After the accident. After the investigation ended. After the official story was created. Mercer pressed play on the tape recorder. Static filled the empty church. Then a voice. His father's voice. Older. Tired. Afraid. Daniel, if you ever hear this, it means I failed. Mercer froze. The recording continued. I spent years believing I could control the damage. I thought I could protect people by keeping the truth hidden. A long pause. I was wrong. The sound of paper moving could be heard. The people behind Blackridge were never afraid of criminals. They were afraid of witnesses. A breath. And Samuel Holt was the first witness. The recording changed. A second voice appeared. Samuel Holt. William, you can't protect me forever. Mercer's father responded. I don't need to protect you. I need to make them believe you are gone. Silence. Then Holt. If they think I'm dead, they'll stop searching. William Mercer. No. A pause. They'll stop searching for you. Another pause. And they'll start searching for the truth. Mercer stepped away from the recorder. The impossible truth began forming. Samuel Holt had not disappeared because he was defeated. He disappeared because someone helped him vanish. His father. William Mercer. The man everyone believed was part of the conspiracy. Maybe he was the only person who tried to stop it. But one question remained. If Samuel Holt survived, where was he? And why had he allowed an innocent woman like Emily Carter to disappear? The answer came from the walls. Behind the old altar, Mercer discovered a hidden compartment. Inside were documents wrapped in plastic. The first page carried a name. Samuel Holt, Personal Journal. The pages were damaged. Some were missing. Some were unreadable. But one entry remained clear. December 23, 1998. One day before Emily vanished. Holt wrote. She found the archive. She knows about the circle. But she doesn't understand the real danger. Another line. The circle died years ago. Someone has been using its name. Mercer stopped reading. Because the final sentence was written differently. The handwriting was sharper. More urgent. Almost like Holt wrote it moments before something happened. The person controlling this is not one of them. He is hunting them too. Everyone thinks he is protecting the truth. He is protecting himself. Mercer closed the journal. The mystery had changed again. Nathan Holloway was not simply connected to the Blackridge Circle. He was connected to Samuel Holt. But how? And why? The next morning, Mercer confronted Holloway. The FBI consultant arrived at the sheriff's office as if nothing had happened. Calm. Professional. Controlled. Exactly as always. Mercer placed the photograph from 1972 on the table. Holloway looked at it. He did not react. That was the reaction Mercer expected. You know this picture. Holloway remained silent. You were here. Still nothing. You were involved. Finally, Holloway smiled. A small smile. Not friendly. Not nervous. A smile from someone who had already accepted the truth would come out eventually. You're asking the wrong question. Mercer's expression hardened. Then what is the right question? Holloway looked directly at him. Why did your father choose you? The room became quiet. Holloway explained that William Mercer had left behind more than a confession. He had left behind a plan. A plan designed for one person. Daniel. Because his father believed Daniel would eventually become sheriff. He believed Daniel would one day uncover everything. Mercer shook his head. My father died protecting a lie. Holloway replied. No. He died protecting you. Then Holloway revealed something Mercer never expected. Samuel Holt was still alive. Not missing. Not dead. Alive. Living under another identity. But the reason he never came forward was not fear. It was because he knew something worse than the Blackridge Circle existed. A person who had spent decades eliminating anyone connected to the truth. A person who had turned the investigation itself into a weapon. Someone who could destroy anyone by making them look guilty. Including Emily Carter. Mercer demanded answers. Where is Holt? Holloway reached into his coat. He removed a small envelope. Inside was a location. A remote cabin deep in the mountains. Coordinates. Nothing else. Mercer looked up. Why give me this? Holloway stood. Because I think you are finally ready. Ready for what? Holloway paused at the door. To meet the man who started this. 3 hours later, Mercer reached the cabin. It was hidden beyond an abandoned logging trail. No roads. No signs. No neighbors. Only forest. The door was unlocked. Inside was a small room. A fireplace. A table. Old books. And photographs covering the walls. Photographs of Ashridge. Photographs of the investigation. Photographs of Emily. Then, a voice behind him. You look exactly like your father. Mercer turned. An elderly man stood in the doorway. White hair. Weathered face. A scar above his eye. But the badge hanging around his neck made Mercer forget everything else. An old sheriff's badge. Samuel Holt. Alive. The man who had been dead for 30 years. The man who knew why Emily Carter disappeared. The man who had been waiting for Daniel Mercer to find him. Holt looked at him and spoke quietly. "Your father saved my life." A pause. But he couldn't save Emily. Mercer's voice lowered. "Where is she?" Samuel Holt looked toward the window. Outside, the snow continued falling. Then he answered. "She found the person behind Blackridge." Another pause. "And that person found her first." Holt placed a final photograph on the table. A photograph taken after Emily disappeared. Mercer stared at it. Because Emily was not alone. Standing beside her was the person they had trusted most. And behind them, written on the wall of the hidden room, was a message. The last light was never meant to be found. The elevator stopped on the 13th floor. There was only one problem. The hotel had 12. The maintenance worker would later swear the display flickered from 12 to 13 for less than 2 seconds before the doors opened. He stepped into a hallway that did not exist on any blueprint. The wallpaper was faded. The carpet was damp. Every room number ended in 13. Room 1313 stood at the end of the corridor, its doors slightly open. When he looked inside, the hallway disappeared. Police dismissed the story as exhaustion. 3 days later, the maintenance worker vanished. Only his flashlight was found. It was still switched on. 28 years later, the city of Greyhaven had forgotten the rumor. The St. Augustine Hotel had become a luxury landmark overlooking the harbor. Tourists admired its marble lobby, crystal chandeliers, and century-old architecture. Wedding receptions filled the ballroom every weekend. Business executives praised its impeccable service. No guest knew that beneath the polished floors lay a sealed level erased from every official blueprint, or that 15 people had disappeared inside the building since 1973. Each investigation ended the same way. Missing. No suspects. No witnesses. No bodies. Eventually, people stopped asking questions. Cities have a way of burying uncomfortable stories beneath newer headlines. Greyhaven was no different. Claire Monroe never intended to reopen the past. At 34, she worked as an investigative journalist known for exposing financial fraud and political corruption. She preferred documents to conspiracy theories, evidence to folklore, facts to fear. Ghost stories did not interest her. Until a plain brown envelope arrived at her office without a return address. Inside was a single black and white photograph. The St. Augustine Hotel. Taken in 1989. Standing in front of the entrance were dozens of employees. Bellhops. Housekeepers. Managers. Guests. Nothing unusual. Until Claire looked closer. Every face was smiling. Except one. A woman standing in the back row. She wasn't looking at the camera. She was staring at a window on the 13th floor. The floor that officially did not exist. On the back of the photograph, 5 words had been written in blue ink. Count the doors after midnight. No signature. No explanation. Just a date. Tomorrow. Claire almost ignored it. Then another envelope arrived the next morning. This one contained an old newspaper clipping. Local musician disappears after hotel performance. Date, October 14, 1996. She searched the archives. The story had vanished. The article existed only in the clipping mailed to her. Every digital record had been deleted. Every microfilm copy was missing. It was as if someone had carefully removed the event from history. Claire recognized the pattern immediately. Someone wasn't asking for attention. Someone was asking for help. That evening, she checked into the St. Augustine Hotel under a false name. Room 1218. Top occupied floor. The receptionist smiled warmly. Enjoy your stay. Nothing about the lobby felt unusual. Guests laughed in the restaurant. A pianist played softly near the fireplace. Children chased one another through the marble corridors. Everything looked perfectly ordinary. Too ordinary. Experienced reporters learned to distrust places that appear flawless. At exactly 11:58 p.m., Claire stepped into the elevator alone. She pressed 12. The doors closed. The elevator climbed smoothly. The display read. The doors opened. The hallway was empty. Long. Silent. Every room was occupied except one. Room 1226. Its door was slightly open. Claire checked the time. 11:59. She remembered the note. Count the doors after midnight. She waited. The second hand reached 12. Somewhere deep inside the building. A bell rang once. The hallway lights flickered. Claire looked forward again. Her breathing stopped. There had been 26 doors on the hallway. Now there were 27. At the very end stood a door she was certain had not been there moments earlier. Its brass number reflected the dim lights. 1313. Claire took one cautious step forward. The carpet beneath her feet felt damp. A faint voice drifted through the corridor. Not a scream. Not a whisper. A calm voice repeating the same sentence again and again. Someone is still checking in. Claire reached for her camera. The hallway lights went out. When they came back 2 seconds later, the extra door was gone. But something else had appeared. On the carpet where no object had been before lay an old brass room key. Attached to it was a faded leather tag. Stamped into the cracked leather were 4 words. It began with a funeral. Not because someone had died. Because someone who had been declared dead walked into the church. The service was halfway through when the heavy wooden doors opened. More than 200 mourners turned toward the entrance. An elderly man stepped inside. His suit was soaked from the rain. His face was pale. His hands trembled. No one recognized him at first. Then a woman in the front row screamed. She dropped the framed photograph she had been holding. The glass shattered across the marble floor. The man standing in the doorway was Michael Rowan. 25 years earlier, Michael had disappeared without a trace. His car had been found abandoned beside Hollow Lake. His wallet remained inside. His wedding ring rested on the dashboard. The search lasted 16 days. Divers searched the lake. Helicopters scanned the forest. Police interviewed hundreds of witnesses. Nothing. No body. No blood. No suspects. Eventually, the court declared him legally dead. His wife rebuilt her life. His children grew up without him. The town stopped talking about Hollow Lake. Until the day he walked back into his own memorial service. The problem wasn't that Michael had returned. The problem was he hadn't aged. Not the way he should have. He looked almost identical to the photographs taken 25 years earlier. The same dark hair. The same clean-shaven face. The same scar beneath his left eye. Doctors estimated he appeared no older than 40. He should have been 65. Medical science had no explanation. Neither did Michael. When detectives questioned him, he answered every question the same way. I don't remember. Where had he been? I don't remember. Who took him? I don't remember. How did he survive? I don't remember. What year did he think it was? 1999. To Michael, only one night had passed. The case exploded across national headlines. The man who never aged. Television networks camped outside the police station. Scientists requested access to his medical records. Psychologists believed he had suffered extreme trauma. Conspiracy theorists flooded the internet with impossible theories. But Detective Evelyn Shaw ignored all of them. She trusted evidence. Evidence never cared about rumors. She reopened the original missing person file. Everything seemed ordinary. Until she noticed one sentence buried near the end of a forgotten witness statement. The lights over Hollow Lake moved against the wind. The line had been crossed out in red ink. No explanation. No follow-up interview. Nothing. Someone had decided the statement wasn't important. Detective Shaw disagreed. She visited Hollow Lake the following morning. The water was perfectly still. The surrounding forest swallowed sound. Even birds seemed to avoid the shoreline. Local residents refused to speak about the disappearances. They all gave the same answer. Nothing good happens at the lake after sunset. One old fisherman finally agreed to talk. Only after making Shaw promise she would never return there at night. He told her something no police report had ever recorded. Every 5 years. On October 17th, someone disappeared. Always one person. Always alone. Always near the water. Police called them unrelated missing person cases. The town gave them another name. The Hollow Man. Every victim vanished on the same date. Every investigation stalled within weeks. Every file contained one unusual detail. Witnesses reported hearing a church bell. There had never been a church near Hollow Lake. Not for more than a century. Then another impossible discovery emerged. Michael Rowan's fingerprints matched the ones collected 25 years earlier. His DNA matched perfectly. But his blood revealed something impossible. Every cell in his body showed biological markers consistent with a man half his chronological age. The forensic laboratory repeated the tests 3 times. Same result. One technician quietly remarked, "It's almost as if time stopped for him." No one wrote that sentence into the official report. 3 nights later, Detective Shaw received an anonymous package. Inside was an old cassette tape. A handwritten label read, "Play only after midnight." She waited. 12:01 a.m. The tape clicked. Static. Footsteps. Heavy breathing. Then a terrified male voice. "If anyone finds this, don't let them ring the bell." The recording ended with a sound that made Shaw's blood run cold. A church bell. 1, 2, 3. 3. Until the 12th strike. Then silence. A whisper. They know you're listening. The tape stopped. On the inside cover of the cassette case, someone had written 6 words. On the morning after the fire, every clock in Winter Harbor stopped at 4:17 a.m. Not just inside the building. Every clock within 3 city blocks. Wall clocks. Watch shop displays. The clock tower overlooking the harbor. Even a mechanical pocket watch locked inside the evidence room. Investigators called it coincidence. The city called it impossible. No one noticed the missing firefighter. Not until 3 days later. Winter Harbor was a quiet coastal city where nothing extraordinary ever happened. Fishing boats left before dawn. Tourists arrived in summer. Families gathered every December beneath the century-old lighthouse. Crime was rare. Violence was rarer. People left their doors unlocked. Neighbors knew one another by name. Then, on the coldest night of the year, the Grand Meridian Hotel erupted into flames. By sunrise, only the stone facade remained standing. 42 guests were confirmed dead. Dozens more were injured. The disaster became the deadliest fire in the city's history. Authorities blamed faulty electrical wiring. The case was closed within 2 weeks. Insurance companies paid millions. The hotel was demolished. Life moved on. Or at least, everyone pretended it had. 15 years later, Detective Elena Cross received a package with no return address. Inside was a flash drive. 1 audio file. 7 seconds long. She pressed play. Crackling fire. Panicked footsteps. Then a man's voice. Calm. Unhurried. He said only 1 sentence. The fire started after the first body. The recording ended. No names. No explanation. No metadata. Only a date embedded in the file. The exact night of the hotel fire. Elena reopened the investigation. Officially, it was impossible. Every physical record had been archived. Most witnesses had moved away. Several investigators had retired. The lead fire marshal had died 5 years earlier. Nothing suggested homicide. Until she reviewed the original victim list. 42 names. 42 death certificates. 42 identified bodies. Everything appeared perfect. Too perfect. 1 signature caught her attention. A firefighter named Owen Hale had signed the recovery report for victims on the 5th floor. But department records showed Owen Hale had been reported missing before sunrise. He was never found. So how had he signed a report written hours later? The original paper document still existed. Locked inside a county archive. Elena examined the ink under magnification. The signature wasn't forged. It had been written by the same pen used for the rest of the report. At the same time, someone had signed the document. After disappearing, the mystery deepened when forensic analysts inspected old photographs from the disaster. 1 image showed firefighters evacuating guests. Smoke covered almost everything. But after digitally enhancing the background, analysts noticed a silhouette standing calmly in a 6th floor window. No panic. No movement. Just a figure watching the fire spread. The hotel blueprint revealed something disturbing. There was no 6th floor. The Grand Meridian officially had only 5. A retired architect refused to discuss the building until Elena showed him the photograph. His face drained of color. There was a 6th floor. He whispered it, as though saying the words too loudly might wake something. It was removed from the plans before construction ended. Why? They found something inside the walls. What? I never saw it. They made sure nobody did. 3 nights later, Elena visited the abandoned hotel site. Nothing remained except cracked foundations and twisted steel. Rain fell steadily. Wind carried the smell of salt from the harbor. At exactly 4:17 a.m., her flashlight flickered. A faint metallic sound echoed beneath her feet. She cleared away loose gravel. Hidden beneath the concrete was an iron hatch. It had no handle. Only a small brass plaque. 4 words were engraved into the metal. Do not open again. Elena looked around. The harbor was empty. The rain intensified. Somewhere beneath the ruined foundation, something struck the underside of the hatch. Once. Then again. Slow. Deliberate. As if someone, or something, had heard her arrive. The body was sitting upright, hands folded neatly across its lap, eyes closed, back resting against a sandstone cliff as if someone had carefully placed it there only minutes earlier. There were no signs of violence. No blood. No broken bones. No footprints leading in. No footprints leading out. Only the wind. The hikers who discovered the scene thought the man was sleeping, until one of them touched his shoulder. His skin was cold. Ice cold. The medical examiner would later estimate he had been dead for nearly 12 years. The impossible part came 2 days later. The fingerprints identified him as Lucas Bennett, a geologist who had disappeared during a government survey expedition in 2009. Except, Lucas Bennett had already been buried. His family had identified a body. A funeral had been held. A grave still existed. Someone else had been lying inside that coffin. Red Canyon stretched nearly 60 miles across the desert, a maze of crimson cliffs, abandoned mining tunnels, dry riverbeds, and forgotten military roads. Satellite signals frequently failed inside the deepest valleys. Compasses drifted several degrees without explanation. Tourists joked that maps became unreliable the moment they entered the canyon. Locals never joked about it. They called one section simply the Quiet Zone. No birds nested there. No coyotes hunted there. Even the wind seemed to disappear. Special Agent Naomi Reyes from the Bureau of Major Crimes arrived expecting a routine identification case. Instead, she walked into one of the strangest crime scenes of her career. Lucas Bennett's clothing showed almost no weather damage. His boots were clean. His watch had stopped at exactly 2:41 p.m. Inside one pocket, investigators found a folded survey map. Every landmark had been crossed out in black ink. Except one. A circle drawn around an empty section of canyon labeled. The problem was, no government record mentioned as Site 14. The original expedition file had also vanished. Computer backups ended 1 week before Lucas disappeared. Paper records had been shredded under a document retention order signed by an official who retired 3 years earlier. The surviving members of the survey team all remembered the trip differently. One insisted there had been 8 people. Another swore there were only 6. A third refused to answer any questions. He resigned from his engineering job the same afternoon investigators contacted him. By sunrise, he was missing. Naomi drove into the quiet zone herself. The silence struck first. Not ordinary silence. Complete absence. No insects. No distant engines. No rustling leaves. Only the sound of her own breathing. Her GPS froze. The dashboard clock reset to 2:41. Her satellite phone displayed no signal. Then, she noticed tire tracks. Fresh. Leading toward a canyon wall. The tracks ended against solid rock. There was nowhere else to go. No tunnel. No road. Nothing. Just stone. Forensic teams later confirmed the tire marks were real. The vehicle had not turned around. It had not reversed. It had simply stopped existing. That night, Naomi reviewed archived aerial photographs dating back 30 years. One image caught her attention. Taken after a flash flood in 1995. For just a single frame, a perfectly square structure appeared in the middle of the canyon. Concrete walls. A helipad. Security fencing. The next image, captured 43 seconds later, showed only empty desert. No buildings. No roads. No sign that anything had ever been there. The satellite company insisted the image was an error. A processing artifact. Naomi wasn't convinced. Because in the corner of the photograph, barely visible beneath layers of digital noise, stood a white roadside sign. Only 2 words could be read.